I'm incredibly lucky that I get to jam with great musicians, and one of the reasons for that is something that jazz beginners often miss. You need to be able to lay down great sounding chords that feel comfortable to play over. If you can't play chords and comp, then nobody wants to play with you. Let me show you 3 rules that your comping needs to follow, and don't worry, none of them are about difficult and complicated chords. Let's take a simple medium B-flat blues with a focus on playing as if you're in a duo with a horn, a vocalist, or another guitar player. Which means that when you're comping, then you are responsible for 3 of the main ingredients of the song: the tempo, the groove, and the harmony. The first rule is be clear. You need to be clear. Make it easy to understand what you're playing, where the time is, and how the groove sounds. If we start with time and rhythm, there's a great Peter Bernstein quote: "Don't be afraid of the one when you're comping." And what that means is that you have to communicate the groove to both the soloist and the audience. So stay grounded and play chords on beat 1 often. That's what makes it comfortable for the soloist and easy to follow for the audience. Be clear. The types of chords that I'm using here are shell voicings, and they are 3-note versions of 7th chords, which are really 4-note chords. But for this one, I'm using, for the B-flat 7, we have the B-flat here on the 6th string, and then so that's the bass note, and then we have the 2 important notes from the chord, which would be the 3rd and the 7th on the middle string set. And that actually works both for this one and also for the other type of shell voicing that I'm using. So first the root, 7, and then 3rd, and then the other type of shell voicing that I'm using is the one where the root is now on the 5th string. So for the E-flat 7, here's the root on the 5th, then the 3rd, and then the 7th. And in this way I can move from B-flat 7 to E-flat 7 in a really smooth way without having to sort of skip around on the neck. And that's of course also a movement that you need to make really often, so that's very practical. Shell voicings are really flexible, simple and easy, but also very clear chord voicings. The trick that I'm using for getting the groove across is actually a superpower of the shell voicings. So if you take the B-flat 7, then you can kind of split it in 2 layers so that you have a bass layer and a chord layer. And of course the same goes for the E-flat 7. And now you have a way to get the groove across, because you can choose to play both layers at the same time or just play one of them independently. And in that way you can play small melodies and more interesting rhythms and change things up. And that's actually something that is incredibly flexible and makes the whole thing sound a lot better. And you'll see later just how much you can open that up and how powerful that is. A mistake that I quite often come across is when students start to play too many sustained chords. Long sustained chords, of course, nice if you have beautiful chord voicings, but it's really hard to feel the groove if you play like that. And it works a lot better when you're playing in a situation where you have somebody else who's then laying down the groove and you can play sort of on top of it. Aim more for something like this. Let's move on to the next rule, which is more about how you play and when you play, before we start opening up what you can do with the chords. Be connected. Now, this topic often ends up being about something that seems scary to most students trying to learn comping. We all want to play big, beautiful chord voicings because that's probably what we love about jazz chords, all the colors and extensions. The most important part of playing jazz chords is listening and knowing when to play. It's much more important to get the rhythm right and not get in the way of the soloist or the other band members when you're comping. You can really make horrible mistakes with that. For example, make sure that you don't play a million syncopated chords. If the feel is more relaxed and open and the rest of the band kind of sounds like this. Another pitfall that I see in lessons where I'm teaching comping is that it turns into being about ear training and being able to, on the spot, transcribe and analyze everything being played while you're also playing the chords. That's not really how it works, of course. You want to hear and catch as much as you can, but you should also keep in mind that if the soloist is really busy and playing a lot, then you don't have to do so much. So you want to be connected with the song and the soloist so that what you play fits the mood and the energy and is nice to play over, but you also want to be connected to what you are playing. This is also often a huge problem for beginners, both when it comes to comping and soloing. What you don't want is that everything is played per chord and that there's no connection between what is happening from bar to bar in your comping. The best way to work on this is to start with the rhythm, and then we can do something with the chords in the next part of this video. An easy way to train it is to just repeat stuff through the song, and you will actually be surprised, I think, to find that a lot of soloists find that very nice to play over because it is predictable and easy to play off and get ideas from, and you can also really rely on it, so it feels really secure when you're soloing. So spend some time just taking a riff or rhythm through the song and then slowly start to develop or vary it. Check how I'm working with the same riff as the previous example, but then just making small variations. When it comes to chords, then if you check, you'll probably be amazed at how most people you admire play very basic and simple chords most of the time. The groove and clarity is much more important. So a good place to start to add some forward motion is to use some basic, very easy passing chords. As you'll see, there are no difficult theory or complicated formulas needed for this. So on the B flat 7, I'm really just thinking about that I want to go to this E flat 7, and the way I do that is just by taking the chord that's a half step above that and then playing that on the B flat 7, because then when I get to E flat 7 I can just slide down and then I'm already there. I'm kind of doing the same thing when I want to go back to B flat 7, because here I'm just using this chord. It is an A7, but I'm not really thinking about that. I'm just thinking about that this one is going to take me back to the B flat 7. Earlier in the video I showed you how to split the shell voicings in two parts so that you have a bass note and a chord. But check out how you can take that up quite a few levels and actually go really far with the same kind of principle. You can probably tell that this is really the same principle. So first I'm just playing sort of the basic chord. I'm just a lot more open with what I can play afterwards. So I'm not really sort of just tied to the shell voicing. I'm really just playing complete triad voicings and quarter voicings, just making small fills with chords, and also on the E flat 7. And here I can really start to add a lot more color also, instead of just using sort of the basic sound of the shell voicing, without being unclear and without sort of getting lost in other things. And that means that you can do really a lot with each voicing. So for this B flat 7, of course I can just play the 2-note shell, leave out the bass note, but I can turn it into a triad, maybe change the melody a bit on that, turn it into a drop 2 or a variation of that. And of course the same goes for the E flat 7. That's the basic shell. Then we have this E flat 7, here's a triad, another triad, and then we go into the sort of drop 2 territory. And all these options are things that you can use to play some interesting chord fills. You can actually also just move out of the position and really open it up. So for the B flat 7, and that way you're sort of transitioning up to higher on the neck and playing a different E flat 7, and also now like a fuller voicing, so not just that shell, but also adding some colors and actually a complete drop 2 on top of it. In this case, since I'm using a B flat blues, it's also really great for adding some of that blues flavor. So here I'm really just leaning in on sort of playing more or less pentatonic, a lot of major pentatonic actually, but having that grace note into the third is a good one. Sliding into it with a complete chord works as well. Of course the same on the E flat 7. So in that way you can really get that blues sound across using this as well. And of course you can also go to complete sections where you're just playing walking bass and chords all the time, really to have sort of that quarter note drive which moves the whole thing forward and sounds great. Once you start to add other chord voicings and complete chord solo fills, then you also need to have a way to think about the chords that tie all those different voicings together. I go over a simple system for that important process in this video, and it's a lot easier than you might think, and also sort of coming from how Joe Pass approaches chords. Check it out.